Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to discuss the deciduous posterior teeth or the deciduous molars. There are no premolars in the deciduous dentition. This is the maxillary first molar. This is most atypical of all the primary or permanent molars. The crown does not resemble any other primary or permanent molar crown. It exhibits some similarities to the crowns of the permanent premolars. You can see that this is a permanent maxillary first premolar. This crown is exhibiting some similarity to the permanent premolar crown. Coming to the buccal aspect, this is the buccal aspect. This is mesiobuccal cusp. This is distobuccal cusp. The mesiodistal diameter is greater than the occlusocervical diameter, also called crown height. The mesial and distal outlines are convex. The mesial and distal outlines are convex and constricted towards the cervix or cervical region. This is constricted or narrowed towards the cervical region. The occlusal outline is comparatively straight. The reason being the buccal cusps are not very sharp or prominent. So the occlusal outline is straight. The differences from the permanent tooth are that the cervical line curvature is greater towards the mesial. You can see here it is greater than the distal. It is less here. The buccal surface is smooth and lacks grooves or depressions. There are no grooves or depressions, you can see here. There is a pronounced bulge present on the mesial surface of the buccal surface, mesial side of the buccal surface. This is called molar tubercle of Zuckerkandl. There is a flat surface occlusal. Coming to the lingual aspect. The lingual aspect, you can see is shorter than the buccal aspect. This is the buccal aspect, it is longer. This lingual aspect is shorter mesiodistally than the buccal surface. This mesiolingual cusp is quite bulky. This mesiolingual cusp is quite bulky. So there may be a single cusp, large lingual cusp, or very diminutive or diminished distolingual cusp. In this case, I am not able to see the distolingual cusp. So there is a large lingual cusp. So the distobuccal cusp will be visible from here because of diminished or absent distolingual cusp. The cervical line is evenly or slightly curves towards the root apex. This surface is convex and smooth, lacking any grooves or depressions. Coming to the mesial aspect, there is disparity between the buccolingual widths at its cervical surface and occlusal surface. Yes, at cervical it is wider, and at occlusal surface it is uh, narrower or constricted. The There is wider dimension cervically due to the prominent cervical ridge on buccal and greater depth of buccal and lingual outlines towards the lingual. The buccal outline is dominated by the cervical ridge, and crest of curvature is in the cervical third. Remainder of the buccal outline is straight. The lingual outline is convex. Most, there is more cervically located crest of the curvature than in permanent molars. On the occlusal outline, there is mesiobuccal and mesiolingual cusps. The occlusal outline is dominated by the mesiobuccal and mesiolingual cusps, and also the mesial marginal ridge. The mesiolingual cusp is more generous in height than the mesiobuccal cusp. So, the mesial aspect buccal outline is dominated by this cervical ridge. Rest of cervical is in the cervical third. Remainder of buccal outline is straight. The lingual crest of curvature is more cervically located and in cervical third. Occlusal outline is dominated by the mesiobuccal, mesiolingual cusp, and mesial marginal ridge. The mesiolingual cusp is more generous in height than the mesiobuccal cusp. Coming to the on the mesial aspect, the cervical line is slightly curved towards the occlusal. The distal aspect is considerably smaller than the mesial aspect, which is larger. There is tapering of the buccal surface towards here. There is tapering of buccal surface towards the distal. Therefore, you can see most of the features of the buccal surface in the molar tubercle of Zeker is seen here. The distal buccal cusp is more prominent than the minute distal lingual cusp if present. The distal marginal ridge is less pronounced than this mesial marginal ridge. Cervical line is straight to slightly curved occlusally. It is very slightly curved occlusally. From the occlusal aspects, there are two types of crown morphology. There may be four cusps named the mesiobuccal, distobuccal, and there may be single lingual cusp line, like in this case, there is a single lingual cusp, or there may be two lingual cusp, the mesiolingual cusp and very diminished distolingual cusp. So this lingual cusp is the largest cusp and longest cusp. The mesiobuccal cusp, this mesiobuccal cusp is larger than the distobuccal cusp, and when present, the distolingual cusp is very diminished cusp. There is a prominent transverse ridge formed by the lingual cusp ridge of the mesiobuccal cusp and buccal cusp ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. The oblique ridge extends from the lingual cusp to the distobuccal cusp. There are three fossae in the middle central fossa, the mesial triangular fossa and the distal triangular fossa. There is no root trunk. Root trunk is that defined that portion of root situated between cervical line and the point of furcation. There are three roots: the mesiobuccal root, the distobuccal root, and the palatal root. Mesiobuccal root, distobuccal root, and the palatal root. The roots are very thin, cylinder roots, thin roots, and more spread or flared. The largest and longest root is this palatal one. Now we come to the maxillary second molar. It closely resembles the permanent maxillary first molar, but is smaller in all dimensions. This is permanent maxillary first molar. It is closely resembling this tooth, but is smaller in all dimensions. It has got four cusps: the mesiobuccal cusp, distobuccal cusp, mesiolingual cusp, distolingual cusp. Also, there is the oblique ridge formed by distal cusp ridge of the mesiolingual cusp and lingual cusp ridge of the distobuccal cusp. It usually has also cusp of Carabelli here. All the other features are resembling the permanent maxillary first molar. It has also got three roots: the mesiobuccal root, distobuccal root, palatal root. Also, these are margin ridges: the mesial margin ridge, distal margin ridge. The distolingual cusp is diminished. The mesiolingual cusp is the largest cusp. All the features are resembling the permanent maxillary first molar. Coming to the mandibular first molar, this primary mandibular first molar has come unlike any tooth of either dentition. It has a prominent cervical ridge on the mesial half of the buccal surface. Height of contour is in the cervical third. Height of contour on this lingual surface is in the middle one third. There are, this is the occlusal table, unusual occlusal table. There are four cusps on the occlusal table: the mesiobuccal cusp, the mesiolingual cusp, and distobuccal cusp and distolingual cusp. The two buccal cusps, the two mesial cusps, the mesiobuccal and mesiolingual cusp are larger than the distal cusps. So you can differentiate right from left from this cusp size. A transverse ridge is present. This is transverse ridge between the mesiobuccal cusp and the mesiolingual cusps. Its anatomy is unlike the permanent mandibular first molar, which has got 5 cusps. So it is an unusual tooth. There are two roots. The mesial root, this is the mesial root, and this one is the distal root. Coming to the mandibular second molar, the mandibular second molar tooth closely resemble the permanent mandibular first molar. This is permanent mandibular first molar. This is deciduous mandibular first molar. But overall it is smaller in size and it is larger in size. The 5 cusps are also similar to the permanent mandibular first molar. This is the mesiobuccal cusp, this is distobuccal cusp, this is distal cusp, this is mesiolingual cusp, and this is the distolingual cusp. The 3 buccal cusps are usually equal in size. The occlusal table is relatively longer buccolingually and less pentagonal than that of the first permanent molar. The mesial root, this is the mesial root, it is longer than the distal root. This is the distal root. Whereas in permanent mandibular first molar, they are nearly equal in length. So this was all about the deciduous posterior molars.